Now, welcome to the Voters Hub, a new weekly discussion segment where you, the voter, have your say. Now, with less than 6 months to a very high-stakes election, we thought it important to create a platform where the issues that matter to Kenyans the most are discussed and hopefully get to the men and women we will be voting come August 9th. Now, on our maiden show tonight, on the panel we have Daniel Orogo, a youth policy analyst. We also have Ruth Bolo, who is part of the chairperson for the International Relations Committee at the Young Democrats Union of Africa, and a political analyst, Dr. Tom Wolfe, joins us from TIFA Research. Also joining us virtually from Mombasa is Josephine Nyamai, a budget coordinator and co-founder of the KE Budget Talk, and lawyer and executive director of the Electoral Law and Governance Institute for Africa Felix Odhiambo. War. Well, we start this conversation with the Elections Amendment Bill 2022 and just what changes with the new proposals and what it means for the average voter. Well, there are 23 clauses in this new bill, but we will focus on just some of the more critical ones. Now, the second clause deals with the conduct of party nominations, essentially giving a clearer definition of political party and nomination and defining registration of candidates. Well, next is Clause 6 that relates to the audit of the register of voters and calls for deleting Subsection 3. Well, this section requires IEBC to engage a firm to audit the register. Now remember, the IEBC has already missed the deadline to find an auditor. That was on February 9th, though it is looking to have that process complete by the end of this month. Now, Clause 16 will reduce the timeline within which a party should submit a certified copy of its membership list to the IEBC, and this would go from 120 to 90 days if the bill is passed. Now, probably the most controversial is the next clause, which seeks to amend Section 44A. The 21st clause would provide for complementary mechanisms for voter identification and transmission of election results. Several concerns have been raised as to what implications this will have on the transparency of the process. All right, so let me bring in Felix Odhiambo in on this. Felix, you've been explaining this throughout the week on various media platforms, but what do some of these clauses essentially mean for the average voter come August 9th?
Thank you, Victoria. And first of all, it's good to be back on Citizen. As you rightfully pointed out, the Election Amendment Bill has 23 or deals with 23 clauses. The truth of the matter is the sections or the clauses that you have highlighted are actually the clauses with the consequential effect, but not so much. But I think even before getting into the specifics, I think one thing that should be pointed out is the timeliness of this bill. This is the kind of bill that you would have expected to have been tabled, given the complex nature of elections in Kenya, but also given the stakes that are inherent in 2022 elections. This is the sort of bill that ought to have been tabled in 2019 or late 2018. But on that, you cannot fault IEBC. IEBC and organizations such as ours had conducted a comprehensive audit of the election sector laws. And the report of that audit was available, as well as a draft amendment bill that I think was available as early as 2019. But be that as it may, I think the clauses that you've mentioned, I mean, like 6 to 1, make the election or streamline the election process based on the shortcomings or challenges that were noted in 2013, but mostly in 2017. So if you look at this bill in totality, most of the clauses and most provisions are actually not bad. I generally agreed with them. The clause on nominations, clause 2, as you have pointed out, the clause on party membership list, which seeks to harmonize the Election Act and the Political Parties Act, given the amendment that was done some time back and assented to by the president. The others are just semantics, like, for example, introducing a new terminology, registration of candidates. That is really what used to be the nomination before the returning officer. and I've seen now we call it, the bill refers to it as a registration of candidates. The amendment of 120 days to 90 days, given where we are in the electoral cycle, I think that is realistic and that is feasible. Now, the elephant in the room is clause 21, as you have pointed out, that seeks to introduce a complementary mechanism of one, voter identification, and B, results transmission. Now, the rationale or the justification, if you hear from IEBC and the political class, is that this clause seeks to align the Elections Act with the judgment of the Supreme Court. Now, it is not entirely accurate on that front. Number two, that clause or that proposal, it seeks to undo the progress that has been made since 2007 with respect to integration of technology in the electoral process. Remember, we had 2007 election, and the Kriegler Commission that went around the country to look at the shortcomings of 2007 election made some recommendations, including biometric registration of voters and integration of technology in our results transmission system. Now, the risk is that if you introduce a complementary mechanism, the first risk is that the understanding by especially the returning officers and the presiding officers in the constituencies, and given the practice since 2007, 2013, and 2017, is that complementary mechanism in actual sense, our understanding is that it means two separate and two parallel results. Now, the technology results, the way the law was before, transmission through technology, the whole purpose of introducing technology in election is that it should give you the advanced copy of the results, and that the manual results actually merely affirms the result as transmitted electronically. Now, the dangers that I see is that if the law is passed the way it is, without some amendments or tweaking it, then we'll end up with a situation where the returning officers, both at the county and the constituency, will have no incentive to transmit electronically. And that is the dangers that I see.
Absolutely. Let me come to the panel here in studio just to get their reactions to that. So beyond the issue of timing of this bill and it being so close to the elections, a lot has been raised there by Felix, including clause 21. The fact that we might have these parallel results, and that's worrying when it comes to transparency, especially when it comes to elections. But what are your reactions to this amendment bill, and what worries you the most about it? I'll start with you, Daniel.
Well, I think thanks to be back here. First of all, Felix has presented the whole issue about the controversial clause to be in quotes, what we've just heard from his presentation. And like he's mentioned, and I've also advocated this in different platforms, that the Kriegler Commission that went round after the 2007 post-election violence had actually indicated to Kenyans that you do not interfere with electoral processes, 12 months, just less than 12 months to the elections. Yet that then is a recipe to chaos, because the timelines that the IEBC will have to make all these amendments and prepare for elections, you've just intimated in your presentation that besides the timelines, there are technical issues, the administrative issues with IEBC. My worry is, even as we speak, the confusion about what is expected to deliver from IEBC. Stippling of finances and budget for IEBC. I mean, that is one thing you're going to mention as well. And coupled with the fact that the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is still going through a process where they'll have to do all this procurement, like you mentioned. They have to appear and explain some of these controversial clauses before. But that be it said and done, Victoria, as a young person, my interest is drawn to the fact that besides that, IEBC is equipped by, given the role purely for enhanced voter registration system that we've just missed the deadline. And one of the attributions to the failure of meeting this deadline is the fact that there is lack of support, there is lack of political goodwill, besides young people not turning out to take, to register as voters. So in all these political debates and semantics, like you've mentioned, and technical terms, the use of it, the worry of the public is, with the number of days that are remaining, would IEBC bequeath one of us to make sure that all these amendments are fit to deliver credible, free, and fair elections,
right,
coupled with the administrative issues that IEBC has. So that is the worry. It's as simple as that. And if it can be equipped to technically deal with this issue before they settle for an election that is coming in 9th of August. Purely that is it.
All right, and Kenyans have huge trust issues with the IEBC, so you've raised a very important issue there. Ruth, before we go to a break, your thoughts?
I think I'll just pick up from where he has left. We seem to be playing salsa as a country with elections. I mean, this is quite an important democratic process that we shouldn't be having such reforms towards the tail end of it. We've got less than 6 months to elections. We do not know how our elections will look like. And the question in most of our minds, just as voters, is what is the best thing for the counting of, the results? Because we went the electoral way, as Felix is saying, and what happened? We have no idea whether the things are still being counted, whether the votes are still being counted or not. We still do not trust the process because we don't know whether the people in France are still sleeping or not. And when you go to the local, to the grassroots area, these are the questions they're still asking. Now you want to take us back to a situation whereby I will not, as a clerk, I won't have to, transmit electronically. So we are making it easier for the politicians and for the aspirants to actually decide on, do I want to actually trust the democratic process and see whether or not I get in, or do I want to use another back door and get in? Because at the end of the day, it is still these politicians that are making these rules. It is still them that are passing these bills. So they know what they want. Yeah. So I don't see anywhere where the electorates are actually being considered. If you look at the timing, if you look at the intention in which, or rather the way they've made it very intentional to ensure that we are going back to the manual system. So that's why I'm saying we are playing salsa. We seem to be making 2 steps ahead and 2 steps backwards. And to the tail end, so that then the excuse that we give is that there's no time to change. Yeah, that's my worry.
And so for you, it's a bill that greatly benefits the political class as opposed to the voters who will be going to the polls on August 9th. Tom, what are your thoughts on this? And the worry is, if not done right, if not implemented, we'll probably have the same fallback as we did in 2017 and head to the courts to decide. Yeah. So, how do we kind of go about that?
Thank you. I certainly would defer to my friend Felix, who's an expert in election administration, and I'm certainly not. And I haven't gone through the amendment bill in detail, but several questions come to mind, which maybe some others here can answer. Leaving aside the question as to the late presentation of this bill to Parliament, who in particular had input into its content? And was the process of designing this bill public? I was not aware of it. Maybe I was looking in the wrong direction until it actually was submitted to Parliament. So what was going on, especially when Felix talks about proposed amendments to clean up some aspects of the electoral process, going back to 2019? That's one question. Another question is, in both of the last 2 elections, as I recall, the losers at the presidential level made serious complaints about the electoral process when things were supposed to be relying heavily on technology. So that suggests to me, again, as a non-expert, that there certainly were some problems with the technology in both of those elections. So one question I have is, has the IEBC or other interested bodies, including Parliament, made a thorough enough investigation of all those technology failures that would, at least to some level, justify introducing an alternative parallel manual transition system to compensate for those technology failures? That is, has there been a clear investigation of those failures which produced a conclusion that there's no way to fix them technologically, and therefore this is the only alternative? And I guess, I have several other questions which I can skip for now, but I would also wonder, I thought the Court of Appeal decision on the Maina Kiai case, which provided, I think, I might be wrong, but one of the bases for the nullification of the last presidential election was that once the results at the constituency level are confirmed, signed by the party agents, and posted on a board somewhere, somebody could take a photo with a phone or whatever, and that would be the final official result. Now, again, my memory may be faulty, but I remember before the last election, we were told by people in media, I don't know, me and you in particular, that we, the public, would have immediate access to those results the moment those were posted, because those photo shots, phone photo shots, would be posted on media and so on, and not a single one was. It all, in the end, came through IEBC anyway. So I don't know how this amendment bill, this amendment would affect that. Finally, going back to my first question, and I'll stop with this, as to what's the genesis, the origins of these amendments. I've seen in the media in the last week very outspoken comments on both sides of the main political divide in the country now, from the Kenya Kwanza side and Azimio side, and mainly MPs, saying this bill is dead, that they're not going to support it. So my final question, I guess, is a kind of a realpolitik one. Does it really have any chance of at least those amendments being passed anyway, when we have people on both sides of the main divide in the current presidential contest saying, no way are we going to take ourselves back to 2007? And if that's the case, maybe we have nothing to discuss.
I mean, some pertinent issues you're raising there, and these certainly need to go to, well, the IBC.
I don't have answers.
And our MPs as well, in terms of public participation and whether they'll deal with those technical hitches when it comes to technology come August 9th. Let's take a short break, though, on that note. We'll be back with much more on the Voters Hub. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the Voters Hub. Now, earlier this week, several government officials resigned from their positions to vie for political seats, which had us thinking about the crop of leaders that will be voting in come August 9th and what criteria we evaluate them against. I want to bring in Josephine Nyamai to give some of her thoughts on just how Kenyans vet the leaders that they want. What are some of your thoughts on that, Josephine?
Thank you, Victoria. Allow me to say that Chapter 6 of the Constitution on Leadership and Integrity is very clear on the principles that are governing leadership in our country. And again, Article 38 of the Constitution gives people right to be able to, participate and influence political choices, either by being a voter or actively participating in the decisions. So we have seen a shift whereby several leaders have resigned on their positions to pursue leadership. And this is okay, but we would want to be a little bit more intentional with the kind of the leaders that we vote in as the citizens of Kenya. One, we may want to vet them what are they bringing on board? We know that when the leaders are coming in, they are coming with some great manifestos, and it is not that they are coming and bringing on table a whole new something to implement. They have to build up on what has already been, has been happening in the country. Therefore, I think it would be very imperative to know whether they know what has already been happening and how they are going to change, because we have seen that most of the time, leaders who are pursuing, leadership positions, they come with a lot of promises. Then how is this going to change on what has already been has been there? And basically, I know some of them, and most of them will be coming up with political manifestos. It is therefore imperative to give us a very clear framework on what they are going to do. If they are coming up with new things, where is the budget that they are going to use to be able to fund those promises to the Kenyans? Because at the end of the day, remember, Kenyans want people who will be able to represent them directly through the democratic process. Yeah, so those are my remarks concerning the quality of the leadership. But I strongly feel that we should be able to exercise and have a full implementation of Chapter 6 on leadership and integrity. Thank you.
Oh, interesting. So linking manifestos with the existing national and county development plans, which we don't see enough of. But, let me come to the panel here in studio. I was reading a very interesting column that said people vote for their leaders, then assess their qualities after the fact. And that's an interesting trend that we see every election cycle. Let me get your thought. Ruth, I got a very strong reaction from you.
Yes, because as she was speaking, I was just thinking, normally when the politicians, or rather, when they come to talk to us, they talk at us, they shout at us. It's never a dialogue where then we can ask them, okay, so you're telling us you're going to build this number of stadiums within this number of time, or you're telling us you're going to have this number of boreholes, but how are you going to do it? We never get to ask that question. So when we go to the rallies and there's the euphoria there, it's a one-way conversation. It's like sitting in a webinar where you're having, or a class lecture and you're not able to ask questions. So what you've said is very true. As electorates, we don't get the opportunity to actually ask our leaders, how are you going to do this? Because there's a lot of what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it, but there's no how in how they'll do it. And the second thing for me is when Josephine spoke about the manifesto, I was just thinking, if you look at these manifestos, they are almost the same, just different colors and a few words changed here and there. And so you'll notice that his manifesto in Ukambani is exactly what I will take and implement, the same thing in Kakamega. The only thing I'll change is maybe his photo and a few words here and there. But the problem is, if, for example, if you look at the various parties that are fielding presidential candidates, you're a presidential candidate, you do have a manifesto, but what your, the member of the MP aspirants on your party ticket are presenting is totally different. How are you going to implement some of these things that need change of laws if your MP candidates don't believe in it? Because when they do get into parliament, they will not be looking at, as a party, this is what we want to focus on and change. No, they'll be looking at, what did my electorate say they want? Is it bursary? That's all I'm going to focus on. What did they say they want? Do they want me to dance with them from morning to evening? That's what I'm going to do. Because we have not sat down as a party to talk and discuss how are we going, what do we want to do? What are our collective efforts? We are not synergizing that. So what we are doing right now is a lot of beauty pageants for the electorates. And then we as electorates, we are not asking them what's happening. And especially during this season, we're at a time where we are no longer locked compared to last year. And so we are quite excited to be back to, the presence of all this shouting and name calling, because if you look at some of the rallies, it is, she said this, so I'm going to respond, but it's my time to use the mic. So we are not really having a conversation on the kind of leaders we want. And that is why the number of voters, or rather, IBC is unable to hit their target. Because no one is interested. It's the same thing, it's the same game, just different players.
Very interesting. So a lot more personality-driven popularity contest than issues on the campaign trail. Tom, there's some interesting insights from TIFA Research that's coming up next week on basically what motivates voters to vote for their leaders. Just give us some insights into that.
I don't want to reveal too much ahead of the release of the data, but I can make reference to a couple of the questions that we put in for the first time. After asking people who they would like the next president to be, the people who were undecided, which has decreased a little bit from our last survey in November when it was 23%. So we asked all of those people who said they had made up their minds, what's the main thing, it was a single response question, that they're waiting to find out before they decide. And nearly half of those said they need more information as to what these presidential candidates are actually embody in terms of policy proposals and so on. Another smaller percent, but still significant, said they were waiting for the running mates to be named. A few others said we need to see the whole menu, how many candidates there are going to be contesting the presidency and who they are. So it's still a pretty early stage to be pinning people down on that score. We also asked again, as we did last time, whether people had changed their political party in the last 10 years, either now supporting a different one or not supporting any. Right. And we got a pretty large percentage, I don't want to reveal the exact figure, and when we asked them why, we got, I guess, predictable reasons. Party leaders had changed, parties had split, and in some cases, they said leaders have reversed the policy positions that they had before. I would just, getting away from the survey for a minute and going back to the earlier discussion, I was quite struck by a comment made in the last couple of days by NARC Kenya leader, Honorable Martha Karua, who I think, if I heard her correctly, say at a rally, advising voters to pick the person, not the party. And that struck me as really strange when she is the face of a party. Now, I know in Vision 2030, one of the goals of the political pillars, of the political pillar, was to have more issue-based politics. And it seems to me that the best way of giving voters clear choices relating to issues is to have parties actually stand for some specific set of policies. But then that brings us back to kind of a chicken and egg. If you look at Kenya's situation, if you look at Kenya as a whole, how could parties be different from each other on the basis of parties when, aside from ethnic concentrations in certain regions, the needs, the desires of most Kenyans are pretty similar? Because most people are pretty poor. You couldn't have a party just for landlords, because there may be 2% of the population. You can't have a party just for coastal fishermen, because again, they're very small. So it seems to me that at this stage of the socioeconomic development of the country, and you still have between 35 and 40% below a poverty, official poverty line, according to the World Bank, unless we change to a completely different political system of proportional representation with party lists and a complete prime ministerial system, where even a party that elects 3 or 4 MPs can go, as we've seen in many other countries recently, like in Germany and Israel and so on, then after the election trying to form a coalition based on a compromise of their different interests, but with each of these miniature parties representing a very clear section of the population in terms of their interests. As long as we don't go in that direction, wisely or unwisely, we're going to be stuck with choose wise leaders, whatever the heck that means, or choose non-corrupt leaders. I mean, you know, anyway, let me stop there. But I mean, I wouldn't blame the voters when the menu is basically giving only meat to a lot of people who are really vegetarians, and therefore they can't eat.
I'm running to
anyway, sorry.
Before it goes in
very
a
briefly,
minute.
because we're about to wrap up. So let's get Daniel, then we get Ruth.
That I completely detest. Because
sorry, what is it that you
listen,
detest?
Listen, Tom,
just be specific.
When you provide different menus to voters, I mean, that's what you're saying is like a chicken and egg.
Yes.
Victoria, I had been an advocate for continuous understanding and continuous voter education. I tend to think in every platform I access, I'm always answering then, what is the role of a Kenyan voter? What is the mindset of a Kenyan voter? Because we are expected, like Thomas said, that in the backdrop of making a right choice of a leadership, you have to deal with, you know, poverty issues. You have to deal with, you know, trying to climb the social ladder. And therefore, your choice for a leadership is always hindered by a number of things, you know, as a voter. So the point at which we will make change is not by a proposal that comes from top to down. It is by the citizens, you know, trying to make change and say, this is the kind of menu that are provided of the people that we have to elect. And allow me to go briefly because of time.
How do they make the change?
You know, that's what I said. On the civil servants resigning, and I think we talked about this before, I am still criticizing that bill because you realize that there is a certain set of people and leaders who are expected to resign. And that's those who are serving, you know, civil servants and public, you know, public servants. And Kenya had actually gave a circular giving the stages of how to resign and who will resign. Do you understand that those who are delegated, those who serve under delegated power, Tom, like the MCAs, like the MPs, are exonerated from resignation. But we are expecting civil servants who are equally competing with them in an equal playing ground in a political field, not told to resign. So I think this bill, for me, and I told you, this for me needs a lot of scrutiny.
Okay, we have
and as I wind up, it's important that the solution is we have to canvass widely as a voter. Even as we head to elections, there needs to be a very important discourse and the dialogue on how then we can have a cross-multi political dialogue. And I think one of the things that you've mentioned for us is that, this, for example, the CMD that are providing for PDF, I think they're always each and every annual year bringing the multi-sectoral stakeholders to discuss. It's
not happening enough. That's the problem. It only happens during the election cycle. Ruth, let's come to you.
I think I just wanted to really disagree with what you said on Honorable Martha Karura's comment. Because again, if you look at 2017 elections, which was, you know, the most immediate, the past election we had, counties that are being told, vote 6 piece, because this is our stronghold area. Some of them are weeping to date because they looked at the party and not at the individual.
Right.
So with how things are set up now, because again in this country, there is the ideally how things are supposed to work, and there's the reality of how things are working.
Okay.
So with how things are set up now, we really must look at the individuals. How is this person's track record? You know, are they giving me enough information as to how they're going to do it? What is their social capital? Besides the funds that they're going to be given by national government, do they have friends outside that can actually help them deliver?
Right.
So what Honorable Martha Karua said is actually, I think I would actually want to applaud it, and I would actually like to echo it. This time round, we actually must look at individuals in as much as we're looking at our party. If your political party is not giving you a candidate that you feel is aligned to your beliefs, is aligned to how you would like your development record to go, then I mean, you need to look at the other candidates in the other parties.
But that was just my point, that there isn't a difference between the parties in terms of policy, and that's why you have to look at the individual.
We have to leave it there.
Daniel,
Tom, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much. We're out of time. I know this can go on for a while, but we have to leave it there. Thank you so much also to Felix and Josephine joining us remotely for the discussion. But keep the conversation going on social media. #VotersHub. We'll be back next week with another passionate panel on what the voters think on this current election cycle. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with much more. Stay with us.